Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing with you Chapter 9 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled, What is Kamma and How Does It Affect Me? This is going to help you to be able to understand the natural law of Kamma, because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. This natural law is what you're actually awakening to. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, this is what the Buddha is teaching you to be able to do, because navigating the world with a lack of wisdom of this natural law is going to produce unwholesome results for you. So I'm going to teach you 4 different types of kamma, and I'm going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome kamma, where by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome kamma or wholesome results. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And at the same time, I'm going to invite you to join for our meditation, where what I'm going to do is start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. Then I'll come in with some guidance to be able to guide you during the meditation. But then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. And then we're going to come out of that meditation with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to take a position, either seated, lying, or standing, these work really well for online learning. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to start with the chanting, which you guys are welcome to join in on. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Otang Mahakewanang Apiwate Sawakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Panusanang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating your mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวะพุทธังมะคะวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone in class today, whether you're joining on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Welcome to all of you, including those that are maybe listening to this on the replay. Welcome to all of you guys as well. Today, what I'm going to be sharing with you guys is Chapter 9 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled, What is Kamma and How Does It Affect Me? This is where you go in and we start talking specifically about the natural law of Kamma, where everything you've been learning so far up to this point has also been about the natural law of Kamma, but now we're going to go in and talk about this natural law specifically. I'm going to help you to understand the 4 types of Kamma, and I'm going to help you to understand how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing any unwholesome Kamma. It's only wholesome Kamma that you're experiencing. And the way that you do this is through cultivating wisdom about this natural law, that you're going to need to first understand it and be able to then independently verify it and then practice it more and more closely. And as you're learning more and more about this natural law and you're making decisions through this natural law, this is your mind awakening to enlightenment, where you're starting to experience more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. Of course, by the time you get to enlightenment, as you guys know, if you've been studying with me for a while, that the mind's going to be completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There's going to be no discontentedness whatsoever. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all that's eliminated from the mind. You're experiencing other qualities too, like the focus and concentration, clarity, and deep memory, and your personal and professional relationships will really be blossoming. You won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility in your mind anymore. You won't even be experiencing a bad mood. And this is coming through the cultivation of wisdom. So whenever you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, it's important not to believe his teachings. You're not believing in this natural law, but instead you're learning, examining, investigating, you're reflecting to independently verify whether it's true or false, and then you start practicing. So as part of our talk today, I'm going to be sharing with you various examples from my life to be able to help you to be able to understand and see this natural law very clearly. Now, some people refer to this natural law as karma. You might have heard that. That's the Sanskrit version of this word, just a different language. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so it's referred to as Kamma. And so people who tend to study his original teachings will use this word Kamma. If this word translated to just one English word, I would just use it because it'd be better for everyone because you could just understand it through English, but it doesn't translate to just one English word, so I still need to use this word Kamma. Just like when we were growing up and we lacked wisdom of a natural law, the natural law of gravity, we struggled and had difficulties in the world. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we cried and cried, we broke our toys, we had so much difficulties because we were living in a world that we didn't understand. We didn't understand this natural law. But slowly but surely, we might say that we awoke to the natural law of gravity, meaning we cultivated wisdom about it. We never believed in this natural law. We saw the truth for ourselves that it actually exists. Like if you take an object and you let go of it, it drops down to the ground, right? Like we know that the natural law of gravity is 100% the truth because we can see it with our own eyes. We're not believing in it. So as we cultivated wisdom about this natural law, as we aged, we learned things like tying our shoes extra tight, looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we're walking. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like kids. And now we're at a point where we can navigate the world peacefully. We can ride bicycles, we can get on ladders, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we make wiser decisions, because we have this wisdom of the natural law of gravity. But when we lacked wisdom of this natural law, boy, did we struggle and have difficulties. When we fell down as a kid, oh, we cried and cried and cried because we just didn't understand the world that we lived in. We were highly discontent in those situations. Well, there's other natural laws that are affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. And if you don't have wisdom of these natural laws, you'll go out into the world and inadvertently be making unwise decisions. And as you're making those unwise decisions, you'll struggle and you'll have difficulties. That's what the stress and the anxiety and the guilt and the shame and the fear and all these other feelings are. It's an indication to you that your mind is not yet awake. It's not yet cultivated wisdom to be fully purified. And now you can use that as an indication to help you be able to see that there's more things for you to learn about this world so that you can navigate it peacefully. But it's important that you don't believe in it. You should be able to see this natural law for yourself. Because oftentimes when we experience unwholesome results or unwholesome karma in our day-to-day life, the unenlightened mind with a lack of wisdom of this natural law will tend to blame other people for the things that you're experiencing. But then when things that are really wholesome and really good are happening in your life, oh, the mind wants to take credit for that. That's all me, right? But these unwholesome things, that's somebody else that's causing all of that. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? It doesn't work in both ways because if the wholesome things are because of you and the unwholesome things are because of other people, this doesn't work. This doesn't compute. Or sometimes what people will say when they're experiencing unwholesome results is that it's bad luck, right? And then when they're experiencing wholesome results, they'll say it's good luck, right? Or that it's destiny or fate. Or some people will think it's God or some entity called the universe that is controlling what you experience. So as long as the mind subscribes to this type of thinking, then you're stuck. There's nothing you can do to change any aspect of your life because you can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate, and you can't change God or some entity called the universe. And you can't change other people either if what you're experiencing is based on other people. So if you resign yourself to this type of thinking, then you're essentially like a robot and you're just stuck. But this isn't how the world is actually truly constructed. What you're experiencing in a day-to-day basis is a result of your decisions and what you're experiencing based on the decisions that you make. So if you resign yourself to this type of thinking that it's other people or these other things that we're talking about, then there's nothing you can do to change what you're experiencing. But if you understand the natural law of Kamma, it's very empowering because now if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But as long as it's other people, or it's good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, or God, or some entity called the universe, you can't do that. So if you're curious, just right here at the beginning, to be able to see that it's your decisions that are leading to any particular result that you experience in life, Ask yourself these questions. Who chose for you whether or not you would attend this class or not? Who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning or not? Who chose your friends? Who chose the job or occupation, or whether you even work at all? Who chose all of these things? These are all choices that you're making. And as I mentioned, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for about your life, you cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. You can construct the ideal life for yourself when you understand the natural laws. So when you understand this natural law of Kamma, you'll make improved decisions. So for example, if we were walking down the beach and the wind was blowing in our face and we started kicking up sand and the sand kept blowing back in our face, we'd be like, what's going on here? Why is this sand keep blowing back in my face? I don't really like this situation. Oh, I'm kicking up sand. That's why it's blowing back in my face. Let me stop doing that so I can walk down the beach and experience a wonderful walk where I can see the view and I can experience the nice breeze coming in off the beach. And now when we make different choices, we experience different results, right? And that's what the natural law of Kamma is going to help you to be able to do. And all the teachings of the Buddha that I've been sharing with you up to this point have been leading you to this point where now you can start going in and you can understand these 4 types of Kamma. And then you can understand how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. And then gradually, slowly but surely, that's what you'll accomplish as you're making your way forward on the path to enlightenment. I'm going to pause, just like always, a few times and open up the questions that you guys might have, because as you know, you shouldn't believe anything. You're not believing anything that I'm sharing with you in the books or in the classes or anything. So if there's some things that I'm sharing that you're not understanding and you need clarity on, that's where you can ask questions. So you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand electronically, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So I'm going to first just start with some basics to help you understand what is the natural law of Kamma before we go in and talk about it in detail. The natural law of Kamma exists and is functioning at all times in every moment. Every single thing that the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law of Kamma. What the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. That whenever you make a certain decision, it's going to produce a certain result. And that result is called Kamma. And you're going to learn about the different types of Kamma. Every being, whether they're aware of this natural law or not, is being affected by it. That it doesn't matter if you know about it or you're aware of it or not, you're still going to experience the effects of this natural law. There's no being or entity that's overseeing this natural law. It's happening as a result of our own choices, our own decisions, based on our intentions, our speech, and our actions. And that's why the Eightfold Path that you've learned previously is helping you to understand wise decision-making around your intentions, speech, and actions, your livelihood, and things like that the Buddha is teaching you. It's important to understand that the natural law of Kamma isn't a system of punishments and rewards, or who's to blame or who's at fault. It's none of those kinds of things. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a dark cloud that's following you around. Sometimes I've heard people talk about the natural law of Kamma like a bank account, that you're making deposits into this bank account. And if you deposit enough in this bank account, you can start making withdrawals out of it and start doing all these unwise things. This isn't true. So I'm going to help you to understand what this natural law is by explaining to you the 4 types of Kamma and helping you to see how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So this is kind of the basics of the natural law of Kamma. And just to kind of summarize that, it's cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. And if you continue to see it any other way, then that means that you're stuck and you can't actually improve anything about your life because it's other people that's causing the things that you experience. But when you embrace this and you see the truth, it's very empowering, because now if there's anything you don't particularly care for going on in your life, cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. This is why you might have seen the same things occurring over and over and over and over again in your life, because if you didn't know this natural law and you were just blaming these other things, then you weren't cultivating wisdom, you weren't making different decisions, and you weren't experiencing different results. This is why you might see the same things reoccurring over and over and over and over again in your life. And by you cultivating this wisdom, making different decisions, you will experience different results. because it's your life, your decisions, and your results. In terms of the teachings of the Buddha, as I mentioned, everything and anything comes back to the natural law of Kamma in one way or another. But when you're starting to approach the natural law of Kamma and you're starting to learn it, there's these two specific teachings that are really helpful for you to be able to understand two important points about the natural law of Kamma. This first one from the Buddha, he says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is that it's only you that can produce Kamma for yourself. Sometimes you might hear people joking around nowadays and like, give me some of your good Kamma, or don't rub that bad Kamma off on me, right? This isn't actually possible. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. You can't give someone good Kamma. You can't rub bad Kamma. I don't think of it as good or bad, but this is how some people talk about it. You can't do these kinds of things. It's just not possible. So it's your decisions that are leading to any particular result, and it's other people's decisions that are leading to any particular result that they're experiencing. Even if you're in a life partnership and you have children around you, the decisions that you are making are leading to your results, and the decisions that those beings are making are leading to their results. Then the Buddha says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. Now, I know that some of you guys haven't independently verified the cycle of rebirth yet, because that's not something you typically do at the beginning of your journey to enlightenment, but it is something you can ultimately get to as you progress forward on the path. But what the Buddha is saying here is that you can't run and hide from your Kamma. That when you make a decision, you're going to experience the results of that decision in this life, in the next life, or in some future life beyond that, right? Ultimately, if you get to enlightenment and you extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma, there is no future rebirth, so there's no unwholesome Kamma to be experienced because you've extinguished it all. But if you still have unwholesome Kamma at the end of this life, then there is going to be rebirth, and you're going to experience the results of those decisions that if you haven't experienced it in this life, you'll experience it in a future life. So you can't run and hide from the results that you're producing based on the decisions that you're making. And every single decision that you make is going to produce some type of result. So when you start to learn this and you independently verify it and you see the truth for yourself, that it's you that's making certain choices and decisions that are leading to any particular Kamma that you experience, it's not other people, and that you can't run and hide from it, then the next question becomes, well, let me learn as much as I can about this natural law of Kamma, because you're not interested in continuing to experience the unwholesome Kamma over and over again. It's like when you're walking down the street or walking down the beach and you're experiencing some unwholesome result, you've got the sand coming back in your face. It's like, whoa, let me make some different decisions here because I'm not interested in continuing to experience this. Well, it's the same thing here on a more lifelong basis. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you to understand the 4 types of Kamma. And then ultimately, like I mentioned, I'm going to help you to understand how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So there's wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. Then there's old Kamma and new Kamma. What wholesome Kamma is any decisions that you're making that are harmless, that will produce wholesome Kamma or wholesome results. That's essentially what that is. And then whenever you're making decisions that are harmful, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. Now, if you've been learning with me for any amount of time, you know that it's not possible for you to cause somebody else discontentedness. And nobody else can cause you discontentedness. If you're experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, or any of those other discontent feelings, it's coming from your own mind's craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations. So nobody can cause you to experience discontentedness, and you can't cause other people discontentedness, but you can cause them harm. What causing someone harm is to cause harm to someone's material possessions, their physical body, or their reputation, things like this. You can cause harm to someone physically or to the material possessions or to their reputation. And anytime you cause harm and you're putting out harm, this harm is going to come back to you, right? So you need to be able to see that it is possible for you to cause harm. And now whenever you're causing harm, this harm is going to come back to you. So let's just take a simple example that you're experiencing right now. right now you're probably just listening to me talk, and you're just sitting there listening to me talk. You're not causing any harm to anyone. That's why no harm is coming to you, right? So you're hearing this voice, you're just sitting here listening. There's maybe other people around you, maybe not, but nonetheless, you're not causing harm to anyone's physical body, to their material possessions, or to their reputation. And therefore, you're experiencing wholesome kamma, the wholesome results. But if you were poking the person's eye next to you, if you took your finger, I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you took your finger and you poked the person's eye next to you and you started poking them in the eye, you're now causing harm to that physical body. And now there's going to be harm that comes to you as a result of that. Person's probably going to slap your hand away or yell and scream, or who knows what might happen, right? There's going to be unwholesome kamma, or unwholesome results that are coming to you. So when you make decisions wisely to practice harmlessness, you'll experience wholesome kamma. But when you make unwise decisions and you're actually being harmful in your decision making, now it's going to produce unwholesome kamma, or unwholesome results. Then you've got old kamma and new kamma. What old kamma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing results of now in the present moment. What new kamma is any decisions you're making now that you're going to experience the results of in the future. So let me help you to understand this. Let's just say 3 years ago, I lied on a tax form and I was supposed to report my income to the government so that I could pay taxes. And now I lied on the tax form. And now 3 years later, I get a notice in the mail that says I owe $3,000. $1,000 for the initial amount, $1,000 interest, and $1,000 penalty. This is my old unwholesome kamma because I made an unwise decision in the past, and now it's coming back to me in the present moment. This is old unwholesome kamma. And now what I'm going to ultimately teach you how to do is how to extinguish this. But whatever decisions that I make now in the present moment is going to produce new kamma. And based on whether I make those decisions wisely or unwisely, it's either going to produce wholesome or unwholesome kamma. This is going to be either new wholesome kamma or new unwholesome kamma. Well, if I didn't understand these teachings in the present moment, I might try to run and hide from this. I might rip up the piece of paper and throw it away, right? Or I might call up the government or write them a letter and start yelling and hollering and screaming at them, right? Being unwise in my moral conduct. Well, that's if somebody doesn't know these teachings. That's most likely what they're going to do, potentially, right? And now they're creating new unwholesome kamma that they're going to have to deal with in the future, right? But if you know these teachings and you understand that your goal is to extinguish this unwholesome kamma that is coming back to you, this old unwholesome kamma needs to be extinguished, then you know the last thing you're interested in doing is ripping up the paper or calling up the government or writing a nasty letter and being bitter and harsh and hostile to them. Instead, in the present moment, you're interested in generating new wholesome kamma. So now you would like to make wise decisions. So maybe you call up the government and you say, "Excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I got this notice. It looks like there was an error in my tax form. I take full responsibility for this. I would like to solve this, but I'm so sorry. I don't have $3,000. I can't pay that $3,000. And now maybe you're so polite and so kind and so friendly with them. They say, "You know what? We're going to drop off the interest. We're going to drop off the penalty. Just pay us the $1,000. And now you might be like, "I'd really like to give you that $1,000. And I really appreciate you dropping those things off. But I don't even have $1,000. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry, sir." Right? And now because you're being so polite and kind, they're going to start working with you and say, "Hey, how about we do this over an extended period of time? What if we put in a payment plan where now over a period of months, you can gradually pay us back," right? Perfect. Now you've got a solution. You've now worked towards a solution to extinguish this old unwholesome kamma by generating new wholesome kamma, right? So this is the 4 types of kamma: wholesome kamma and unwholesome kamma. This is going to be generated by harmless decisions or harmful decisions. And then you've got your old kamma, which is any decisions you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of today. But then any decisions you make today are going to produce new kamma for the future, right? So even if you could snap your fingers and instantly start practicing the teachings perfectly, which you can't, you're still going to experience unwholesome kamma. this is still going to come back to you because you've been making unwise decisions in the past, right? So now to go into this a little bit more, using the words of the Buddha to help you see what's producing this wholesome and unwholesome karma, because it's connected to something that I taught last week. If you were here or you've learned with me the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots, this is what's producing the unwholesome karma. That when you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, this is going to produce unwholesome karma. Remember, the craving is like the mind's selfish desires, the mind longing, yearning, chasing after the object of its affection, wanting and expecting things to be a certain way. And if you get what you want, you get happy, those pleasant feelings. And if you don't get what you want, you get the painful feelings like anger, sadness, and frustration in others. Whenever you're making decisions through those selfish desires, it's going to produce unwholesome karma. And then when that anger is arising, the mind attributes it to something external. In the unenlightened state, the mind lacks understanding, so it firmly believes that these anger, this hostility, this bitterness, this frustration, this annoyance is coming from something external, so it will tend to make unwise decisions and be very unskillful when this anger is arising. And that's going to also produce unwholesome karma. And then there's the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion and misunderstanding about these natural laws. And whenever you're making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. And you can look at every situation that you've experienced where you've experienced unwholesome karma, and you'll be able to trace it to craving, anger, and ignorance, that these pollutions in your mind are motivating unwise decision making. So if you lost a friend, or if you had a relationship that broke up, maybe you were angry and hostile and bitter, right? Through your intention, speech, and actions. That was your anger that was coming out. And it was caused by your craving, your longing, yearning, and wanting things to be a certain way. And where the cravings exist in the mind, that was coming from your ignorance. The mind was just unknowing of true reality and didn't understand what it didn't understand. So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce this unwholesome karma. And then when you make decisions through the wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, that's going to produce the wholesome karma or wholesome results. Generosity is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. This is where you're living open-handedly, being joyful and sharing with others. This is going to produce wholesome karma for you. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill. And when you're practicing that with the people around you, you'll experience wholesome results. And then when you're making decisions based on wisdom of these natural laws and the teachings of the Buddha, you're going to experience wholesome results or wholesome karma. So generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom is what's going to produce the wholesome karma or the wholesome results. So what you're doing on this path with all the teachings of the Eightfold Path and everything else that the Buddha taught is you're gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance, emptying that out of the mind, purifying the mind of that. And then you're gradually increasing over time decisions that you're making based in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And when you live your life that way for an extended period of time on the Eightfold Path, that's ultimately what's going to extinguish your unwholesome karma. But I'm going to go in a lot more detail and explain to you how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. But first, I would like to pause here and see if you guys have any questions about the 4 types of karma or what is karma. So there's wholesome and unwholesome, old and new, and then I explain to you kind of what is karma generally. So let me know if you guys have any questions on anything I've been sharing so far. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now I'm going to go in and help you. Oh, here's one from Adela or maybe Joe.
Hi, David. Yes, this is Adela. My question is around old karma. Is that something that you have to or you should address, like with your example with the IRS or something, or it could be anything else, or like is that something that you can let go? Will it like follow you around for the rest of your life, or should you kind of try to resolve it? and address it.
If you know you have outstanding things that are open and that are going to impact you in the future, yeah, you can proactively eliminate it. I can tell you guys a little story if you like about this. One time when I was really young, in my early 20s, I had this 4x4 Jeep, and I parked it at a friend's house. And I went inside, and there was a tow company waiting in the parking lot, and they towed my Jeep without even talking to me, and the whole parking lot was empty. And I just parked in a place where I didn't know I needed to park, this other location. So I parked, and they towed my car. I found out about it. I found out where they were, and I went there to go pay and get my Jeep out, and they weren't there. So I jumped over the fence, put it in 4-wheel drive, and plowed out of the fence and knocked the whole thing down. And of course, I got a knock on my door from the police late at night. They ended up dropping the charges because they couldn't prove that it was me that was driving, but they sued me civilly, right? And I had this outstanding civil judgment for many years. And then ultimately, when I resolved it, I decided to proactively do that. My lawyer told me about 10 years before, they said, I have this whole drawer of judgments that people never pay. You don't even have to ever pay this. It'll just sit here in my drawer. But me knowing the natural law of Kamma and being interested in extinguishing that, I proactively reached out to the business owner many years later. I apologized for what I did. I took full responsibility for it. And I knew that he had paid $1,000 to repair his fence. And I offered him the $1,000, even though the judgment was for $2,000. And he accepted the $1,000. Right. So this is the way to proactively extinguish something, because if you leave it hanging out there, it will affect you.
Mm-hmm. And would that be the same for like relationships? Like if you had a friend or something and that relationship fell apart, or maybe it was your fault or something, would you suggest reaching back out?
If you've had personal relationships that have fallen apart, it doesn't typically make sense to go back and try to resolve anything with that, because the relationship's over, and that's going to extinguish your unwholesome karma in that situation. Because if you try to go back and make amends, that person's mind might not be in the same place as you, and it can kind of bubble these things up, and it can actually produce more unwholesome karma. But if you have a situation from your profession or your business, because of your livelihood, this can actually affect your ability to sustain your life, it can make sense to go back to a business partner or a business contact and resolve that. But a personal one, it doesn't really make sense to go back and try to resolve that, because at the end of the day, this person's mind might not be in the same place as you and willing to actually resolve what it is that you're trying to resolve. Now, if you run into that person and you guys bump into each other and you'd like to resolve something, that's another thing that you could potentially do that. But there's no need to go back, because there's all kinds of situations that we've experienced in our past relationships. And if you try to go back and resolve every single one of those, it would be unwise to do that. It would only be wise, and like I mentioned, in a profession where maybe it's affecting your livelihood, you would like to go back and fix that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. And you've already been learning about this up to this point. The way that I think about this is that throughout our life, before getting on this path to enlightenment, we've been essentially shoving mud into our garden hose. And we've been putting all this mud into our garden hose. That's the unwise decisions that we were making without even realizing it, because we didn't understand the natural law of Kamma, right? And now what you might be choosing to do is hook your garden hose up to a faucet and start opening up the faucet and getting some clean water going through this garden hose. Well, if you're coming to class, once every 6 months, if you're meditating once a month, if you're reading the book, once every 2 or 3 months, 10 minutes, once every 2 or 3 months, you've got like a little drip going through this impacted garden hose. And you're not going to clean that mud out in this lifetime. But if you are regularly attending classes, you're actively building up your meditation practice, you're reading the book, you're maybe even seeking personal guidance or asking questions to be able to clarify your understanding, you're actively applying the teachings in your day-to-day life, you've opened up this faucet really, really wide, and you've got all this clean water coming through your garden hose. You've got all these wise decisions that you're putting into your life. Well, even though you're putting wise decisions into your life, you're putting water into the garden hose, it's going to spit mud. right? Because we put mud in there. We can't run and hide from that. We need to experience that. So this mud is going to come out of this garden hose, and it's going to spit mud potentially for a period of time. But then eventually, if you put enough clean water, enough wise decisions into this garden hose, it's going to start spitting some clean water. But then it's going to go back to spitting mud again because there's still mud in the garden hose. But if you put enough water into this garden hose, you might get mud, 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 clean water, but then it's going to be mud, mud, clean water, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, right? It's going to eventually get to the point where you've got nothing but clean water coming out of this garden hose. Because for an extended period of time, multiple months and years, you've been making wise decisions based in the Eightfold Path. And that's why it's so important that you commit that Eightfold Path to memory, because you need to be able to practice it on a day-to-day basis. Understanding that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And slowly but surely, you'll be able to extinguish all your unwholesome karma because now you're only making wise decisions through the Eightfold Path. So I'm going to give you an example from my life so that you can understand this, right? So when I grew up in a very hostile, very bitter and harsh environment. Lots of anger and hostility, arguments, things like this were going on in our home. So as you're growing up, you're going to basically conform to what's going on to the things around you. Your mind is going to be conditioned to experience the world based on what's going on around you. So as a child, if you observe your parents yelling and hollering and screaming, that's going to be what you tend to do growing up too, because that's how you've learned about the world around you. Conversely, if you grow up with people who are quite calm and peaceful and joyful, you'll tend to function in that way. But I didn't grow up that way. I grew up with a lot of hostility and bitterness and harshness around me. In fact, I can remember being at McDonald's one time with a family member, and the fries didn't show up on our tray, and there was a lot of yelling and hollering and screaming at the cashier instead of, "Oh, ma'am, it looks like the fries are missing. I thought I had ordered fries. Is there something that I misunderstood?" Right? You could very easily and politely handle that, but that's not the way that it happened, right? So my mind was conditioned to function this way to a certain degree. So growing up, I tended to treat people in that way for a period of time. Of course, there was some politeness and respect here and there, but there was this bitterness and hostility that was in my mind, and I would tend to treat people that way to a certain degree. Well, when I met my wife, who I'm with now, and we first met, of course, when you first meet, right, you're on your best behavior. It's the honeymoon phase, right? You're putting out all the stops to do all your best behavior, but eventually then the bitterness and harshness and hostility comes out, right? So for a good long 11 years, this is what was going on. There was politeness and respect in certain situations, but there was also some bitterness and harshness and hostility in certain situations too. And after 11 years of that, and then, of course, long before I met my wife, there was a certain amount of difficulties and struggles in life. I decided at the 11th year mark of this marriage that I'm done with this hostility. I'm done with this bitterness. I'm done with all the unwise decisions. And I was interested in doing something vastly different with my life and in my relationships. I wasn't interested in experiencing broken relationships over and over and over again. So I started working on my mind and transforming my mind. But because I had made so many unwise decisions in the past, I had to experience my unwholesome karma. So even though I was being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, I was being warm and gentle, my wife was not there yet, right? She was not doing that. So when I would come home sometimes, I would just walk in the door and she would just start yelling and hollering and screaming at me. Where in the past, before I knew these teachings, I would have just yelled and hollered right back at her, right? But once you understand these teachings, you understand that's the last thing you're interested in doing. Because if you put out that bitterness and harshness and hostility, it's just going to come back to you. So now, having a new understanding of these teachings, at the 11th year mark, when I would be getting this bitterness and harshness and hostility, I would just walk away, right? Instead of standing up there and fighting till death and arguing, because that's essentially what two unenlightened minds will do. It's like two wild animals fighting to death, right? That's not what I chose to do. I chose to walk away. And then she could see that she was the one who was angry, and I wasn't angry anymore. And I had to do that many, many, many times to be able to train my mind. Then as my mind started to get more discipline, I would just sit there and listen to her when she would yell and holler. Sometimes she was telling me how bad of a husband I was in the past and all the unwise things that I had done. And I was like, yep, you're right. I was a terrible husband. I did all those things. I really made some unwise decisions. But what about now? She's like, you're not doing that anymore. Okay, thank you, dear. And then I would why her and I would walk away, right? And then I had to go through this. Lots of yelling and hollering and screaming for an entire year and a half. But it was becoming less and less frequent. And it was becoming less and less intense because I wasn't putting out any more harshness and hostility and bitterness. It was only her that had to extinguish it in her mind. But after a year and a half, she had fully extinguished it because I wasn't putting out any more bitterness and harshness and hostility. And now we're at the point where it's been many years. There's no arguments, there's no frustration or anything like that. There's still disagreements where she'll be interested in making one decision and I'll be interested in making a different decision. But now we sit down and we talk about it and we discuss it. Where before it was a fight to death in order for me to get what I want and for her to get what she wanted, right? But we understand that that's unwise. So we understand that disagreement is normal. This is just impermanence. That's all that is. Of course, my wife has a different idea of how she would like to do something because she's a different person and there's impermanence in the world and she's not going to see things in the way that I see it. And of course, I have different ideas and thoughts than she does. So all we need to do is just sit down and share those with each other. And at the end of the conversation, we walk away with a decision. It'll either be all my decision or all her decision, or it'll be a combination of the two. Or in some situations, we can both make our own independent decision and it doesn't actually affect either person. And we can just go forward with our own independent decisions, right? But there's no more fighting. There's no more arguing because we understand impermanence. So we learned how to practice right view, right intention, right speech, right action, and all these other teachings to get to the point where there's no more bitterness and harshness and hostility in the mind. And I've extinguished that unwholesome kamma that I generated over all those years. And now I've got this wonderful, harmonious relationship where there's no bitterness and harshness and hostility. But then there was another aspect of this unwholesome kamma that I generated that I needed to extinguish. I noticed at that time, my son was only 6 years old. He was being bitter and harsh with his mom. They were having a difficult relationship because he had learned it from me. He saw me over the course of his life being bitter and harsh and hostile to his mom, so he was starting to do the same thing. So I needed to extinguish that unwholesome kamma too. So I needed to teach him about these teachings and help him to develop a better relationship with his mom. And slowly over time, that's what they ended up doing. They were able to also get to a point where there's no bitterness and harshness between the two of them, right? So this fully extinguished my unwholesome kamma. So even though I was dabbling with the teachings all these years, all the way dating back many years ago, it wasn't until about 7-8 years ago that's when I firmly decided, let me get on the path and really start making significant changes in my day-to-day life. But I still had all that unwholesome kamma to deal with that was coming back to me. So you're going to have those situations and you can extinguish them, but you need to be sure that you train your mind and get to the point where you're practicing so well that you're no longer putting out any bitterness and harshness and hostility. Because there's certain relationships in your life that you have right now that have bitterness and harshness and hostility in them. And one of the ways that you're going to clean that up is in the relationships where you're not committed to that person and you're not interested in being in a long-term relationship with this person, and you know that there's too much hostility either on your side or their side to really be cleaning this up and you're not committed to cleaning it up, the best thing you can do is just walk away from the relationship. Just gradually move on. You don't have to tell the person that's what you're doing or anything like that. Just gradually move on from the relationship. But then there's going to be other relationships. The second category of relationships, which are people you are committed to, people you are interested in being in a long-term relationship with, like my wife. And you're going to need to work on your mind. And then as you work on your mind, you'll be able to be better in these relationships. Because what we tend to do is we tend to try to change the other person. That's what the unenlightened mind wants to do in order to fix your life, is to try to change the other person and put expectations on them. But that's not going to work. You actually need to change your mind first. And by you changing your mind, you will function differently in the relationship. And then that person needs to choose to train their mind, because that's what my wife chose to do. when she could see that her husband was no longer angry at her, it was her anger, she learned that she had to train her mind. And that's what she was doing on her own because she needed to make those choices. So the second category of relationships are people that you are committed to, maybe your parents or your life partner or your children or people like this. You're going to need to train your mind and let go of the cravings, expectations, the attachments, so that now your mind can get to a point where it can be loving and kind in all situations. And now you can be better in these relationships where you're not putting expectations on the other person to try to control them. But then there's a third category of relationships, brand new people. You've never even met them yet. You don't even know their names at this point. And you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships, practicing the Eightfold Path. And those relationships will be very healthy and sustainable, fulfilling and harmonious for you. So these are the three categories of relationships. Some that you're going to need to just let go of and move on. Some you're going to need to work on your own mind and be better in that relationship. And then there's brand new relationships that you're going to need to only ever be loving and kind and warm and gentle in those relationships. And now you can clean up all your unwholesome kamma in your relationships, making wise decisions about who you choose to associate with, right? Because you could make decisions unwisely with new friends. And now when you make those unwise decisions, it can be producing unwholesome results for you. So where you see that other people are making unwise decisions or you're making unwise decisions, you're going to need to clean up your mind and make wiser and wiser decisions about who you choose to spend time with, cultivating wholesome relationships. So this is what you can do as you make your way on your journey to enlightenment, is clean up all your unwholesome kamma by extinguishing this old unwholesome kamma coming back to you, by making new decisions in the present moment to produce wholesome kamma, by making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Because when I was practicing with my wife, there was a certain amount of generosity that I was practicing during that year and a half. And even now, we still practice generosity with each other. That helped me to clean up my unwholesome kamma. And I was being loving and kind with her, and I was practicing wisdom. So you're going to need to make new decisions that are producing wholesome kamma through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So let me know if you guys have any questions here about extinguishing your unwholesome kamma. Okay, I don't see any questions here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the last part of our talk today, which is about laws of society. Because sometimes when people hear me teaching about the natural law of Kamma, they say, hold on a second, David, hold on a second. You just said that you can't run and hide from your kamma. What about that person who the bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, their car was full of blood, and they went to court and they were found not guilty? Didn't they run and hide from their kamma? Well, the answer is no. They haven't run and hid from their kamma. Instead, they're still experiencing their kamma. You just might not understand what they're experiencing as a result of the decisions that they've made, and you might not be there when they're experiencing their unwholesome kamma. The first thing to be able to understand this particular topic is to understand that the laws of society are not the natural law of Kamma in its entirety, because the laws of society are created by human beings. So that means when human beings are creating and enforcing laws, they're imperfect. Because human beings are imperfect. They have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind. So you can go to court and actually be guilty and be found not guilty. And you can also go to court and be not guilty and you're actually found guilty. This happens plenty of times too, because the laws of society are imperfect. We should always aspire for more and more equitable laws to be created and to enforce our laws more and more equitably. But just understanding human beings and the laws of society, that there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be errors, because human beings are prone to errors. But that individual who killed and they went to court and they were found not guilty, they can't run and hide from their kamma. They're still going to experience it. It's just going to be in other forms that you might not be aware of. So let's just take that example of someone who has gone off and killed, and now they've gone to court and they were found not guilty. Well, they're still experiencing their unwholesome kamma. Here's the things that they'll experience. They'll experience a bad reputation in their community because the news has gotten out. People are aware of this individual. and this individual is all over the news. People are talking about it. This individual has a bad reputation. This individual also is going to experience sickness, disease, certain physical and mental pain, and they can even experience a shortened lifespan as well. The way that this happens is that if you have enough craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind to kill another human being, that means that there's a massive amount of discontentedness in your mind. You might have guilt and shame and fear and frustration and all these other emotions in your own mind. And now that's putting strain on the physical body. And now the heart, the lungs, the liver, and all these other organs are going to have more and more difficulties to function. So you can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, as well as a shortened lifespan. Also, there's going to be a certain amount of hostility, aggression, and fights, and even potentially being killed yourself. Because if you have enough anger and bitterness to kill another human being, it's not like all your other relationships are perfect, right? You're still experiencing hostility and bitterness and harshness in other relationships that you're in because you're putting that out in all these other relationships. You can even experience a loss of income and wealth, right? Because it's very expensive to go to court and defend yourself on a murder charge, right? You're going to lose some income and wealth. And like I mentioned, your relationships, they're going to be difficult as well. This individual is going to experience difficulties in many, many other relationships because their craving, anger, and ignorance wasn't just isolated to this one relationship where they killed this person. It's in all their other relationships too. So they're struggling in those relationships as well. They're also going to have difficulty securing and progressing in employment, securing housing, and acquiring the basic necessities to sustain life. For example, if you got an application for somebody to be your roommate and you knew that they were accused of murder, but they were found not guilty, are you interested in them being your roommate? Right? Probably not. You're not going to be interested in living with this person, right? So they're going to have difficulty securing housing. And then ultimately, there's discontentedness in rebirth itself. The guilt, the shame, the fear that's in the mind from having chosen to kill human beings, and rebirth itself. This is all going to weigh on an individual, and they're going to be experiencing these results. So this individual hasn't run and hid from their Kamma. They just were able to escape these laws of society, which are imperfect, right? And it can happen in this way where somebody is truly guilty, but they were found not guilty. So if you see a public case and you are sure that this person is guilty in your own mind, but they're found not guilty, you don't have to worry about this. They're going to experience the results of their decisions. They can't run and hide from that. But there can also be situations where people are actually not guilty. They're innocent of that particular crime, and they're found not guilty. I'll give you an example of that. Let's just say that I was in a gang from the age of like 18, and all through my 18, 19, 20, my early 20s, I was committing all kinds of crimes. Maybe I was selling drugs. Maybe I was killing people, but I never got caught for any of this stuff. But by the age of 25, maybe I decided to get out of the gang. And now I'm maybe 26, 27 years old, and I'm distancing myself from this gang. But now let's just say the gang went out and did a murder, and then somehow it got pinned on me. And now I go to court. I wasn't even there. I haven't been associated with the gang for a year or two, but I've been found guilty of this crime. And now I'm going away to prison for something I actually didn't do. This is the results of my decisions, that all those things that I did that I never got caught for, like the selling of drugs and the killing of other people that I never got caught for, now I'm going away to jail for this one that I actually didn't really do, right? So you can have these kinds of situations occurring as well. So you never have to be worried about whether someone's going to experience their Kamma or not, because you can't run and hide from it. And anything that you've done in the past, you're going to experience the results of that. You don't need to be fearful about that. You don't need to worry or have anxiety about it, but you will experience the results of your decisions coming back to you. And as you're experiencing that coming back to you in the present moment, you need to stay calm and focused. Maybe you need to step back, think about it for a few days or, maybe even a week or two, and think about how can I extinguish this unwholesome Kamma by making new decisions that is going to produce wholesome Kamma. And where you're having challenges to do that, that's where you can reach out to your teacher. And you can explain to me the situation of what occurred in the past, what you're experiencing now, and now how can you extinguish it? Because that's the cultivation of your wisdom. There's so much that you can learn in these classes and in the books and all these different things. But when you're experiencing certain Kamma in your day-to-day life and you reach out for help, that's where you can really cultivate some wisdom to be able to now apply these decisions in your day-to-day life, and you'll be able to see how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So you're always welcome to reach out to me by asking questions in class, by posting in our Facebook group, and I'm the only one that'll answer your question. You can send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance on our website, and then we can meet in Zoom one-on-one, and I'll be able to listen to anything that you're experiencing and help you to be able to understand how to extinguish it. I won't tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. I'll just give you guidance, and then it's up to you to make whatever decision that you make. And if you make the decisions the way that I'm suggesting or recommending, great, that's fine. And if you choose not to make decisions that way, that's fine too, right? My love and my interest to help you is unconditional, right? Even if you do something opposite of what I shared, that's completely fine. That's your decision. And then you'll be able to see the results of those decisions. And that'll actually help you to cultivate wisdom about this natural law. So you're always welcome to reach out for guidance at any point, because there's so much that you can learn in these classes, but there's a level of wisdom beyond that that you need to be able to learn how to apply these teachings in your day-to-day life. And it's situation by situation that's going to help you to be able to do that. So let me know what questions you guys have, because this is everything that I have to share with you guys on this topic. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to end class here by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. As you're learning and growing on this path, this is the natural law that you're awakening to. There's other natural laws too, but in one way or another, they're all coming back to this natural law. This is kind of like the umbrella. And then there's other natural laws that are underneath of this, right? So this is what you're gradually learning and growing and developing to understand. Next week, we're going to be in chapter 10, which is titled, What is Merit? This is a unique type of wholesome Kamma that I'm going to help you to understand what this is and how to generate this wholesome Kamma. So you can read it ahead of time or you can read it after class. It's up to you, but I'm going to teach it to you next Sunday. On Wednesdays, of course, we have meditation, where now we're already done our 3-4-part series. So what I'm doing is I'm just rotating between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. And I'm guiding students each Wednesday in a meditation session. And then I just open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to the path to enlightenment. Tomorrow, Thai time, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'm going to be starting a 5-day course, which is a course that I teach every month, which is Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course. So you're always welcome to attend that. I teach it from 9 a.m. in the morning till 3 p.m. in the evening. Here in Thailand, and then it's recorded and live streamed, so you're always welcome to attend it. Essentially what that course is it's like the first 2 months of the group learning program. So if you're ever interested in a refresh about what you've been learning up to this point, that's a great little course for you. And it's recorded, so you can even watch it at your own pace if you'd like. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.